What does it take to make workshops work? And how can we facilitate collaboration that sticks and leads to results? My name is Miriam Hatness, and with the Workshops Work podcast, I am on the mission to find the magic ingredients that make workshops work. Today with me on the show is Roumayne Schepers, and we talk about art-based learning and how we can facilitate deep insights through art. So stay tuned. And by the way, if you don't have pen and paper at hand to take your own notes, why don't you visit workshops.work to download my free one-page summary? And now enjoy the show. Hello, Roumayne, and welcome to the show.
Hello.
I am excited to talk to you today about facilitation through art, and mainly in the museum, and how to take this into the online world.
Yes, great.
And before we get there, I always like to start the conversation with the question, when did you start calling yourself a facilitator?
Well, I think it goes back not so very long because up until 2 years ago, for me, it was very clear what my function name was. I was a pharmacist for 12 years. Oh. So this was really obvious and really straightforward. I'm a pharmacist. And then 2 years ago, in the summer of 2018, I quit my job and I started my own company. And from then on, I started working as a facilitator, but I did not call myself a facilitator. So, and there was also not any point that someone asked me, what is your function? What? So I never had to mention it. And I believe I saw myself more as an initiator of starting a creative adventure for people. It is up till, I think, this summer that I call myself facilitator. And since then, it's also more clear to people. Then they think, oh, you're facilitator. And they all of a sudden they can imagine something that I do because it's something new. It's something with art. It's in a museum with a group. So then they have a little bit of an imagination what they can expect. But of course, yeah. So now I use it, but the first 2 years I did not use it often. No.
I can very much relate to that.
Oh, luckily.
For me, it was similar.
Okay.
And how did you get from pharmacy into museums, from the pharmacy into the museum? How did that happen?
Well, so I worked 12 years as a pharmacist, but there was always a gut feeling. I will not be a pharmacist until my 60s, 65 that I have to work. So a little bit like the last 5 years, I started doing a photography study here in Amsterdam, for the Photo Academy. And this is where my own creative adventure started. And here the teachers always told me, oh, Roumayne, if you want to get inspired, also go to musea and see what other people make. So I did that as a student. But before, I never really visited a lot of musea. I did not grow up when I was young going to musea. My parents did not bring me there. But when I was there during my student life, I felt so quiet and peaceful in the museum. So my work as pharmacist was always really hectic and a lot of pressure. And there it was so the silence was so big, almost loud. That's really weird to say about silence. But so I really had the chance to be there with my own thoughts. So that really made a big impression on me. And I was pregnant of my second child and I was on parental leave. I took 2 months more parental leave because I decided, okay, 1 month I want to be extra with my newborn child. And the second month, I really want to be with my own creative process. What do I want to do in life? I knew that I did not want to be a pharmacist anymore, but I did not know exactly what to do then. So this was really a frustrating period for me. And this is where I met someone, an art historian, and she already used the art-based learning technique that I now use in the musea in her own workshops. And when she told me about this method, I thought, oh my, that it exists. I'd never heard of it. So all of a sudden I met something that I could really relate to. And all the years before, also during my studies, I never really felt this way. I never felt connected 100% of being a pharmacist. I was never good at a certain math or any thing at school. So it was really a nice encounter. This is where it started. It's been a long story before, but
it's interesting. So what does art-based learning mean?
Well, in short, I always explain to people it is a really nice way to let your own creativity speak up, to bring it to the surface. Because I strongly believe that everyone is creative, but a lot of people, they don't use it, or they're not aware of it, or they maybe don't allow it in their own lives or in their work. I also did not do it for a long time when I was a pharmacist. I always knew that there was something, but I did not use it in my work. And with art-based learning, you really get this creativity, you bring it up to the surface. So everything that happens comes out of your own body, your own mind. You always start with a really personal question to initiate this process. And it's really an interesting process that people go through.
And you do this in a museum. So you would pick a piece of art and then ask a prompting question. And you do this with groups or with individuals?
I started with individuals only. So I brought friends, entrepreneurs to the museum. And then all of a sudden it changed into groups. So I organized network events for entrepreneurs to come together, but also do their own art-based learning session. And later I also invited teams to the museum, because also with the background of working in a team in my pharmaceutical company, I realized it's so necessary to bring this creativity and to explore this more for people and teams. So now it started individuals. I still do it with individuals, but groups are now my main focus. Yes.
And what are they? And I will come to the questions you asked in a bit, but what is there to learn? If it's art-based learning,
yes,
I assume that what there is for the groups you guide or facilitate to learn is not about art, but about themselves or about the team. What is the learning goal of such a session?
So first, because art-based learning is always an individual process at first. So you learn a lot about yourself. What is your thinking about things, your own creativity you use. But when they do it in a team, they also learn to listen up to each other, to hear stories that they recognize, to hear also stories that are maybe different from what you think. So I think it's very important, especially these days, that everyone thinks differently. And it's really nice that you can learn from each other, that you can hear stories about problems that you recognize, but that are solved in a different way. And what is very important, that you really make the connection with each other. So this is also what you experience during this art-based learning. So it's all about yourself. It's also about stories from other people's perspective. And then at the end, you share these stories and you also connect with each other.
What I hear is that the piece of art is objective, but the way how we look at the art is purely subjective, but we cannot judge each other, or there is no right or wrong how we perceive the art.
Yes, exactly. And this is, of course, myself included, a lot of times our rational plays a big part in solving problems or doing our jobs, but also this creative part and share this with the world is so important. But I don't know, it takes a bit of time that people also allow this creativity in their lives. For example, I share free creativity breaks on Instagram and on LinkedIn. They're both different platforms. On Instagram, when I share this, and I share an abstract painting, and I ask the people, what do you see? Just use your imagination. Everything is possible. Mm-hmm. On Instagram, a lot of answers come up, from flying elephants till flying objects. Everything can happen, and people also share it. When I do this on LinkedIn, the people are a bit more, how do you say it in English? Reserved. Mm-hmm. They are, I think they are not allowing themselves yet to also share this creative process, to this imagination step. I think there's still a threshold for people to really share that.
On the other hand, maybe they just use the platforms for different purposes.
This, of course, is also true, but I also think the people who are interested, because I receive a lot of direct messages, mm-hmm. and people share their answers. And also there are a few people who told me, I find it a bit exciting to mm-hmm. really share this on my LinkedIn profile, mm-hmm. because then my boss will see it. And so I find this a really interesting topic.
It is interesting. And do you observe the same then in the teams that you guide through? So that they would first have a reservation in the beginning to really share what they see?
Yes.
And then maybe they lose up through the process?
Yes, because of course I guide them through the process, and these are all little steps. So it's not all of a sudden you have a question and then see the artwork and then boom, you have an insight or an answer. But a lot of times you will feel that there's a bit of hesitating, or they think, oh, what are we going to do? Are we going to watch art? Are you going to tell me something about this artwork, about who is the painter and stuff like this? And always at the end, people are so surprised, and they are thinking, oh, did I watch an artwork for 1 hour? The stories that they make up themselves, they are sometimes also surprised by their own stories that they write down. Mm-hmm. Sometimes pages full of things that pop up from their own experience with this artwork. Wonderful. So they never would have expected this. Yeah. So it's also often it's also a surprise what people experience in the museum during a team session. Yes.
Yeah. And how do you choose the artwork? Because from your previous example on the reactions on Instagram and LinkedIn, I can imagine a modern art, very abstract. So is it always abstract, or would you also go into the Rijksmuseum and sit in front of a Rembrandt?
Yes. The nice thing about art-based learning is that you can do it with every kind of art piece. It can be an abstract painting. It can be a figurative painting. It can be a sculpture. It doesn't necessarily have to be a painting. It can be a video, an installation. Everything's possible. Even with video, it is possible to do it. So this is also the really nice part, and also where people get engaged with the whole process. In the beginning, they can choose the artwork themselves. So we just walk around, and I do it on a very fast pace. I always say I don't want to rush the process, but this is part of the process, so that they don't get their rational thoughts helping them with choosing the artwork. So it really is, in a split second, they will see an artwork and then they have this feeling with it. It attracts them. And Jeroen Lutters, he is the founder of this method. He says it can also be that the artwork chooses you. So you don't know what it is in the artwork that chooses you, but there is something in the artwork. So people are all with their own artwork. Yeah.
Nice. So how do you choose the question then?
The questions, we always start with writing down a question. So every person for themselves. And the question needs to be something that is occupying your mind for the last days, for the last weeks, sometimes even the last years. It has to be something that is bothering you most of the times in your head. So it can be, for example, a question. When I think of myself, I had this question: how can I enjoy the process more? I was a pharmacist at that time. I knew I wanted to do something else, but I did not know what. So my question was, how can I, as long as I'm not at this end goal, how can I enjoy it more? So this can be a question, but it can also be a question, how can I
be a better leader,
better facilitator? How can I have a better relationship with, fill it in. Yeah, it is your own question. Yeah.
And this would also be for a team, or would a team then get the same question and then reflect?
With a team, I always ask, you can do different things because it can be really personal. And if you have a personal question and you want to share this with the team, not everyone is willing to share this. It is not obligated, so people can keep the question for themselves. But it is the best if the question is as personal as possible. So what I also sometimes do with the team is think of one big question that the whole team can answer. So for example, now we live in a situation where everyone works at home. So if I now do a team session online, it can be, how can we survive this period at home? How can we make it more acceptable or fun, or you can fill it in. So it can also be something that the whole team experience, and then you do your own process, but during the workshop you share a lot of stories to stay connected. Yeah.
And since you already mentioned the online space, how does this work online? How did you make the transition?
So I do now, because we're all sitting at home, so I cannot go to the museum in real life anymore with groups. So we do it in a virtual museum. So I did not build the tool I use, but I put in the paintings in the museum. And this is where we all meet with the group. So we use Zoom as well. And then we meet each other in the museum. This is where all the artworks are. This is where people choose the artworks, and where they do their art-based learning session, where they look at art 2 times half an hour. So yeah, this is where it all happens at the moment.
2 times half an hour. Did you shorten the periods?
I shorten it for online. I shorten it. So in the museum, when I always did it 2 times 25 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. And online, I make it a bit less, depending. I always look and feel how the group behaves, what their reactions are. And of course, you can also see in one screen that they are still writing. So then I know, okay, they still need a bit of time. But I make it 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes as a max. Yeah.
I was wondering because I can imagine that 30 minutes staring at a piece of art on the screen is long.
No. Yeah, it's long.
And then how do you guide then the group from this truly personal experience of seeing the art to this becoming a group experience where there's some sort of team building?
Yeah.
So
we build it up. So to start with the end, this is where all the stories are shared. And this is really the most valuable step, of course, because then people get to share, people get to hear really the story that they made with their artwork. But before, I also make little steps, and we also make little breakout rooms so that also they can talk about and share experiences about the previous step. So if it's about, I put people in a breakout room where they can share which artwork they have chosen and why they have chosen it. Was it because of the color? Was it because they really did not like it at all, but that there was something? So it's all about sharing little stories. And every step, people get the chance to share these stories with each other.
And what happens in this process? What have you observed?
That people are sometimes surprised. Of course, a lot of times they are colleagues, so you know each other in one way at work, but you actually maybe don't know what kind of artworks they like, which colors they like. So you really get to know a person in a totally different way. Also, there's one step where you can step into the artwork. They can share with each other, were you able to step into this artwork? Or did you thought, oh my God, what am I doing? And you always recognize something. And this is really, I think, the power of the method that sharing your own stories is so valuable for making a connection with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And especially now where we're all sitting at home, we are longing to see each other. Yeah, sharing stories. I think this is the basis of the whole process.
And it sounds almost as if the artwork becomes a sort of facilitator as well, because it's the artwork that makes it easy to share in a quite safe space, because it's just art and you make out of it what you want to make out of it.
Yes, and it's almost like an anchor or something that you make for yourself, that you share with others, and that you from then on also know from each other. So you know your own artwork, you know the artwork that your colleague picked, because you cannot also, because it's an image that you have in your head. So it's really easy to remind. So when you do it with 10 colleagues, you have 10 artworks that you bring home with you. Of course, the one that you picked has the bigger story and your question related to it. But you also bring home the other artworks from your colleagues. So it's not easy to forget them as well. Yeah. And it's like an anchor. You will next month still talk about it. Or that you know, oh, you picked Van Gogh, what was so nice with the head. So it's easy to stay in contact with people through a story.
And now that you mention Van Gogh, I wonder, and coming back to a question that I already asked, I'm intrigued. I can imagine that especially those artworks that we have seen so many times, that are so famous, that we almost got detached from them because they're so almost normal. Yeah. How do you choose the artwork? And do you have the impression that it's actually maybe beneficial if they know the artwork already, or would you rather exclude those?
I would not exclude those, because also people attended that knew a lot about the artist, for example. And for them, it's still possible, but it takes a bit of longer time to really get to their own creativity. Because they already know the stories behind a certain artwork or a certain artist that made the artwork. So for them, and I help them with it, it takes a bit longer to detach from that story of what they already know. And at the end, you want to have your own story, because this is what art-based learning is all about. You start with your own question and you end also with your own story around this question, whether it's an answer or an insight. And you don't want to share the same story, because that's not your story.
It makes it vulnerable, the process.
Yes. Yeah.
What is your experience when you transition from offline to online? Do you think that it's easier for the groups to really step into this vulnerable creative space and sharing, or is it rather more difficult?
What I experienced, and I was, to be honest, a bit skeptical about it myself. I was skeptical in a way that I thought, we are not going to watch art through a screen. No way, this is possible. And then Esther of Stormpunt, an innovative agency, she invited me to do an experiment with this virtual museum. And what I noticed with the first group, but also with the groups after, is that people are more, it takes them less time to share really vulnerable or personal stories. And I was also in the beginning a bit surprised by that. And I think when we are in a museum, we are with a group, but you also have your whole environment. We are not alone in the museum. So you are with your colleagues standing there, but you are always have people around you walking by, or the people who work there. And it depends on the museum where you are. Sometimes really quiet, and then you have a lot of space to tell your story, also your personal stories. But here, everyone is sitting at home in their own safe environment.
Yeah.
So I think this really helps that people are more open, but also it takes less time that they are also open up and share really personal stories.
Yeah.
Maybe because they are at home and that they know we are only with our own group.
Yeah.
I think this is the most important reason.
Also I think because we can be sure that nobody else is listening.
Yeah.
I can imagine when I'm in a public museum and then suddenly I'm sharing maybe a childhood memory.
Yeah.
And then I don't know who else is listening.
Yes.
And I think in these breakout rooms on video conferences, it's just the group.
It's really safe environment. Yeah.
Very intimate as well. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. When I'm in a real museum, I think this is my role to feel, okay, who finds it really easy to share a story, but also the people who find it a bit more difficult. This is my role, I think, as a facilitator, that I create a really safe environment, whether it's online or offline. And especially with this example that you are in a museum in real life, I really have to create the environment that they can share this story if they want. But they also have the choice not to share this story. It's not necessary for the group process or for the connection with each other. If you don't want to share this really personal question, you can share what attracted you seeing this painting, or how did it feel watching an artwork for 25 minutes. Was it difficult? How was it to step into this artwork? What did you see? Of course, these are things that they can. This is more easy for them to share. Yeah. So this is my role when you were in the real museum. And then when I notice that people find it a bit more difficult, then I help them.
Hi, this is Andrew. I'm a facilitator and head of customer success at Session Lab, the dynamic workshop planner tool. More than 30,000 facilitators, trainers, and coaches use our workshop planner tool and save time and effort in the design process. So, how do they do it? Our drag and drop agenda builder makes it easy to transform your ideas into high-quality workshops, and the timing of your agenda automatically updates when you make changes. You can collaborate in real time with your colleagues and easily share professional-looking printouts with your clients. And if you need inspiration, you can check out our library of more than 500 activities and exercises and simply drag the ones you need right into your workshop agenda. So check out Session Lab to save time and effort in your workshop design process. And now get your first 2 months of Session Lab Pro absolutely free at sessionlab.com/workshopswork.
So what is your strategy or your favorite exercise to create the safe space?
For me, and I think this is also something that I'm really curious about people's stories. And it's not that I'm so curious that they have to tell me the story, but I'm also already curious why they picked this artwork or what attracted them in this artwork. So every piece of the art-based learning method, I'm also curious about their story. So this helps a lot. Also, when I feel, I think also to see, okay, which people are really maybe hesitating in the beginning, to really connect with them as well and not thinking, oh, difficult, don't pay attention. Usually I do pay attention to them because probably there is something that's, keep them hesitating. And I try to, bring them all together in this group so that they can also learn from each other, because a lot of times people recognize also the behaviors of others.
So how can you then approach someone in the online space where you cannot just step towards one and have a private conversation unless you're using a different virtual conferencing tool than Zoom? But it's more difficult for you than to really take one person by the hand when you have the impression that they are more hesitant.
Yeah, but sometimes I make only a group of the two of us when the other peoples are doing their rounds. And I also always have one screen where I can see everybody. So my Zoom is always on so that I can see are people really sitting like this, or that they are really into the screen and that I see an active body language. So this is for me really important with online sessions, that I can see the people, that I can see if they are smiling or if they are only not paying attention. Yeah, this is something that for me is really important. Although we are in a virtual museum where we can, of course, see the avatars walking around, but the Zoom is always also, for me, helpful to read.
Very interesting. And then, so as soon as you see from the body language that someone is maybe disengaged, would you then send them a message? So what holds them back and how can you find out?
Sometimes I just ask. In not, oh, I see you don't understand it or you don't want to do it. I'm asking curious questions. Does it exist? I don't know. I ask them questions. Yes. I'm asking questions. Oh, I'm really curious about which arc you're going to pick. Is there something you want to ask up front? Or so I always try to just ask them a question, a really open question. It can be anything. Yeah. But to be honest, I never really had someone who was hesitating in the beginning. In one way, I always find them that they will come and do this session. The
magic of art.
Yeah, because they are also, of course, curious. And I try to make them curious as well, that there is an artwork waiting for them in the museum. Yeah, I try to help them exploring this curiosity. Yeah.
I'm just, I'm intrigued.
I think you have to experience yourself.
Yes.
Because sometimes I also experience talking about this and people experiencing it afterwards, then they are like, oh my God, yes. And although I also talked a lot and listened a lot to the founder of this method, but this is really a method that you really should experience. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, wow, this is it's magical. For me, it's really magical. Yeah.
I was just intrigued by how to read the body language, because I think it can be subtle to recognize whether someone is maybe leaning back because they want to think and just need this extra space, or whether they're leaning back because they're bored.
Yeah.
Or they're zoning out.
Yeah. But what one of my questions is, it's not that I always point to the person, but I really ask a direct, open question. Mm-hmm. And this always helps to get the group moving. And also the people who first hesitating, they are slowly engaging because I make them curious. And they can almost not ignore their own curiosity. Yeah.
And at the end, when you're sharing the stories, would you then walk together from art piece to art piece for the person to really also relate their story to the work?
You mean at the end when they share stories?
Yeah,
it depends on the group. So if I have a group of, for example, 8 people, a team of 8, we always do it with the whole group, because then we have time to hear every story. But if we, for example, with 35 people or 40 people, then I always split them in groups and give them instructions how to share this story. And then we put them in breakout rooms. And when I'm alone as a facilitator in the online session, I hop from breakout room to breakout room. If I am with more facilitators, we can split up, and one is present in the one breakout room and the one is in another breakout room. But if I'm by myself, I hop through all the breakout rooms.
Oh, I'm curious now. How do they react? Because I can imagine, in the physical space, you can slowly walk into the room. You're very gentle. You don't just jump in and you're there suddenly and you take space. So how do you approach, or how do you jump literally into the breakout rooms without disrupting the flow and almost breaking this intimacy that is about to evolve?
Oh, you mean as me as a facilitator?
Yes.
Well, at first it's really important that they know it up front.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning, I have to admit I did not tell them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was there.
Exactly, right?
In the breakout room. So this I learned from that. Like a little ninja. I was breaking into the breakout room. I always tell people now up front, I will visit all the breakout rooms. Mm-hmm. I don't know in which part I will break in, but just continue with your story. I'm very curious about what you are telling. Maybe I missed some really nice stories about others, but as long as you share the stories with each other, just pretend I'm not there. And of course, if you want to ask me something, I'm always there to help or to facilitate. So now I really tell them up front. This is a really important step, yes.
Yeah. And what is your role then in these breakout rooms? Is it just to learn and to guide, or is it your own curiosity?
I think in art-based learning as a facilitator, you really make the basics to keep people curious. Mm-hmm. So also when I break into a breakout room, I am honestly very curious about what they are telling. I'm curious about their process. And the breakout rooms, the steps, they don't take like 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I just put them in a breakout room and I'm doing nothing. We have a lot of contact in the main room, and then they share stories in the little breakout rooms. And then at the end, I hop from one-to-one breakout room. I think I can help them already in the main room by telling them or give examples. Or sometimes I also invite someone who already wants to, that I pick one person who wants to share the story with all of them so that we also have an example. I'm not doing that all the time, but sometimes it helps to imagine, okay, we are now going to do this in the step 4, for example.
Yeah. What makes, in your opinion, a workshop fail?
I think a workshop fails when there's no true connection between the facilitator and the group that is attending the workshop. So you can be there physically or online, but if you are not engaged, then you don't have to expect that other people can engage. And with the art-based learning sessions, it is also really important that I create a really safe environment where they can share stories. Yeah, I think this is the most important.
How do you do that?
To create a safe environment by really telling them upfront what is going to happen, that they are not surprised all of a sudden. Yeah, I notice also for me, if I don't know what I'm going to expect, when we started also with a personal question, then it can feel a bit unsafe. Some workshops don't need to have everything outlined in an agenda or that you really tell every step in detail. But with art-based learning, it's really important that upfront, I take them on a little road trip. So with every step, I will tell them, what are we going to do and why are we going to do it for? And what is part of the creative process, for example. So I guide them in every little step.
Yeah, and I get that. I think especially if you want people to open up and to share personal things, certainty about what will happen and what they're expected to do, and maybe also what they can say no to.
Yes. Oh, this is really important. Yeah.
Really creates
I always say
safety.
that it's not obligated to share your personal question. It's not about that. Yeah. This is not the end goal. If you don't want to share it today, for example, don't share it. Don't share it. This is also something I tell them. Don't share it because your other colleagues share their story or their question. So I feel obligated to also share it. Don't do it. If you don't feel it, don't do it. This I always tell them. I also do it in the briefing up front. So not only in the museum, but also up front when they receive the emails. I also tell this. Yeah, I make a little video where I explain a little bit, and I try to repeat that also later in the workshop.
I like the video part. So you send the video up front before the workshop starts? Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
What would you recommend someone who would like to use art in their workshops? How to use a piece of art to make it accessible to? How to pick the piece of art and maybe what question to ask?
It totally depends, of course, on what kind of workshop you give. If you want to do an art-based learning session, I always try to put in all kinds of different types of artworks. So not only abstract artworks, but really everything mixed type of artworks. It's really important. For example, now the virtual museum is filled with almost, I think, 80% of paintings of the Rijksmuseum. Mm-hmm. And you are allowed to use these artworks also in a commercial way. I think this is also important because, of course, if I just pick a painting from someone and just use it in a commercial way, this is also, of course, not allowed.
Yeah.
So this is something you have to think of. And in the virtual museum, I was thinking about that. And maybe if someone listens, I'm very curious about this. I picked the paintings. I hang them up in the virtual museum. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the sizes, for example, are not totally the same sizes as in the real museum. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, and I know that a self-portrait of Van Gogh is maybe smaller than what they will see, but I made it bigger or other way around. Yeah, I always tell this not to, because I also encourage them to go afterwards to the real museum.
Not that
I don't want to that they will be disappointed.
Yeah.
And this is I think the advantage when you are in a real museum. A painting can be really big and it can have a big impact on you also in that way. Yeah. And this is, of course, something that you have to have in mind. Can be different in the museum, but a lot of times people don't know this. So this for them at that moment, it doesn't matter, but I don't want them to be disappointed when they visit the Rijksmuseum and it's much bigger or much smaller.
Yeah.
I think you have to inform them about this. Yeah.
True, because when I imagine you experience the Nachtwache, for instance, the night watch, in a different way, just because it's so huge. So you first step back, but then maybe you go into it to really see the artwork.
Yes.
Whereas the self-portrait of Van Gogh, you really have to come close in order to enjoy it. So I can imagine that it's a different experience for the individual.
But the thing is, this is, I think, the advantage in the virtual museum. Although you won't have the big impact, the impact of the size of the Nachtwacht, for example, but you can go really close into the artwork. So in the Rijksmuseum, you can get this close to the artwork. In the virtual museum, especially with a night watch, because it has such. You can get an image with a very high resolution of this painting. So you can really zoom in so into detail. You can really see all the painting that is used. So this is, of course, an advantage of the virtual museum. Yes.
Oh, nice. I'm curious now.
Yeah.
I will visit your virtual museum. Wonderful. And since we're already approaching the hour, I cannot believe that time was flying so quickly.
Yeah.
If someone fell asleep after minute 1, just woke up, I'm like, what is it all about? Looking at strokes on a screen of artwork, but doesn't have time to listen to the show in its entity. What would you like them to take away?
Then I would start with a question. What is it that is bothering you now in your head, or what is occupying your mind? What are you stressing about? What are your main questions in life at the moment? And I am pretty sure that everyone can come up with one question. And with art-based learning, you can get insights around this question. Sometimes you even get answers to this question. And it's It's not the main goal to get this answer, but from all the stories and from all the people that up to now did these art-based learnings, they all took something home, whether it was an answer, an insight, a feeling. Sometimes you know the answer. I am also a believer that everyone knows deep down inside, you know the answer, but all of a sudden you also feel it. You think, oh yes, this needs priority in my life. I need some action. And you get home with a little mini exercise, a mini action that you will do that week, also to keep moving around this question. So if you have a question, art-based learning is a really nice and creative way to deal with this question and to know more about yourself, about others, about the world you are living in.
Beautiful. So much we can learn from art,
Yes.
although it cannot speak to us.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it does.
Yeah, it does.
It does speak.
This is also what Jeroen Lutters tells. The second step, it's called the object is talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
The artwork really tells you something. And at the end, you make a story of this, but it's also the artwork that wants to tell you something. Yeah.
Now I have another question. I cannot finish this yet. Because this brings to my mind that we really have to be present. Because in order to hear an object, a piece of art,
yes,
we have to hear from the inside, from our inside. So we need to be very present. Are you doing some exercises to really bring this presence and calm to the group before you start?
No, but we don't start immediately with that step. So we always start, of course, with this question. Then they will pick the artwork. Mm-hmm. So this is already in a museum. It's already a nice and quiet environment. Mm. I think me as a facilitator, I'm not really like a really busy person. So I also try to bring down this group a bit more in a peaceful environment. This is also very important for people to know. Maybe you recognize it. I recognize it for myself with meditating, for example, that I'm always really busy in the beginning. I'm stressed out. I cannot do meditating. It's not nothing for me. And then after a few minutes, I calm down a little bit. And if it takes a bit more minutes, I'm more calm. And it works the same in this step where you watch an artwork for such a long time. Mm. In the beginning, people, and this is also what they share. In the beginning, I thought, oh no, 25 minutes. What did you say? I was stressed out. I thought I was not able to watch an artwork for such a long time. And at the end, like I think 98% always tell me after the second step, oh, is it already time? It's a surprise for them.
Wonderful.
I like that as well. That art teaches also to get the answers in silence. Mm. The silence is really an important during an art-based learning session. Yeah. And sometimes it can feel a bit, we're not used to it. We are used to that we can be on our mobiles all the time. Mm. Can get instant messages or instant information. It's not the case with art-based learning. Yeah. Maybe people should know.
True. And
it's an experience, yeah.
And it becomes meditative as such.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I will put the links to your museum and to your contact in the show notes. So
yes.
If someone is interested to learn more, they know how to reach out to you.
Yes, it would be great. It's one of my big dreams that I live in Amsterdam. I was raised in Netherlands, but I was born in South Korea. And one of my dreams, I don't share it a lot, but is to connect people from all over the world. So it would be so nice. And with this virtual museum, it is possible that people of all parts of the world, they can enter the museum. So it would be really great if I encounter some people that I can connect with each other. Yes, would be wonderful.
Wonderful.
So thanks for that.
Thank you. Thank you for staying tuned and listening to the show. I appreciate your attention as I know how busy you are. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and engage by sharing your comments and thoughts, and visit workshops.work to download the one-page summary. I'm looking forward to seeing you back at the next episode, and I wish you a fruitful day.